Hello, Hazel Park School administrators. This is Rich Volts, and I told Amy what I'd like to do is do a summary of my Danielson training with you so that you can review it as you're getting into doing these teacher evaluations. And I'm sure January, February, and March are going to be really busy times for you, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get back before many of you have completed or have almost completed all your teacher evaluations. So hi to Amy at the district level, and at the high school, hi to Carla, Jamie, and Dave. At your junior high, hi to Tammy and John. At Hoover Elementary, hi to Leslie. At United Oaks, hi to Mark. At Webb, hi to Corey. Hi to Judy at Jardin. Hi to Michelle Krause at Edison Max. And hi to Michelle Laporte with the Adult Vendor Program. And hi to Shelley. Hi to Steve and Michelle Bissell at the Alternative High School and at the Advantage Program. So what I'd like to do now is take you through some of the information I wanted to share with you before I could get back to Hazel Park, or even if I do not get to back to Hazel Park this school year, at least you'll have this information on file. First thing I'd like to do is apologize that I did not get to spend more time at the high school. I feel like the administrators at the high school are in need of a lot more time for me to spend extra time with you as you're visiting classrooms. So maybe when I come back next time, I could spend maybe 2 full days at the high school, 1 full day doing observations with Dave and Carla and Jamie, and then on the second day I could sit with you as you do some post-observation conferences, because I have done that with all the other administrators in the other schools, except for Leslie, because she was absent during the time I was there. Maybe I can work Leslie in as well. So some of the things I'm wanting to review with you are these 6 steps of my teacher evaluation system, the scoring of observations, how you conduct these post-observation meetings both for informal and formal observations, and then how to prepare reflective questions to ask the teachers during the reflective meeting. So I picked these topics because I noticed when I was there, these are the things I think you need the most work with. So as a little summary, I want to remind you that I do have this website that is illinoisasa.wikispaces.com, and on this website you'll see that I have Danielson workshop files as one of the chapters on the side. So if you would check into Danielson workshop files, there's a bunch of information that I have put here, and I'm going to refer to this one in a little bit. It's a principal who summarizes how she did the 3B informal observation. But in addition to that, remember I have these templates here that would help you as you're going into classrooms to do informal observations. If you do your informal observations with your 10, 15, 20-minute informal observations, if you bring these templates with you, depending on which domain and component you are focusing on, I think that would be extremely valuable for your work. Now, when I was with you last week, I didn't see any administrator bring any of that information with them to the observations, and I do think it would be good information for you to have. So I think you should download these documents, and I'd also recommend that you share these documents with your teachers as well. Now, this is a principal in a north suburb of Chicago, Deerfield, where she explains how she did the 3B informal observation. And this is when you are solely concentrating just on working on recording evidence from the teacher and the students concerning questions and discussion that happens in the classroom. So a little review for that is that, remember, what I'm wanting you to do is to capture all the words from the teacher and the students and questions they asked. Then I'm wanting you to capture who's answering the questions, like teacher to student, student to student, student to teacher. And then I want you to analyze the level of questions that are being asked by circling the verbs and going back and looking at the verbs according to maybe Bloom's taxonomy to determine the level of thinking that's happening in the classroom. And this principle in this video that you can find on my network, it does a very good job explaining how it was valuable to her when she was dealing with a teacher who was needing improvement in the way she was asking and answering questions in class. Now, another thing that I've done is I am going to be sharing with you on Google Docs informal observation documents that you can use when you're doing informal observations. So what I'm showing you on my screen next, this is my app that I developed that Amy had used in her prior district, and you don't have this, but I'm just going to show you the informal observation that we developed on the app that I've shared with you now in Google Docs. So on the app, if the administrator would check informal observation and they would go to this page, you'd see they have 2A through 3E tabs for each one of those. For example, if we went to 3C, you'd be able to see that I have a variety of explanations from the Danielson language concerning what's happening in the classroom, in this example for 3C. So how you would use this information in the Google Docs, which looks very similar to this, is when you'd see something, you would, in the Google Docs, I just have a number there, I don't really have a box, and then you would put in this description box, you would put in this box the evidence that you have collected that would relate to checking this box. So this is something that you would give the teacher then as information. So what it looks like in a Google Doc would be like this. Let's take this same one, 3C, we were just working at. If you double click on it, you're going to see it's going to look real similar to what I was just showing you. But instead of a box, what I've done is just put the number rating in there. And below the box, again, you would put in this box the evidence that you're using to collect the information. So I'm going to be sharing these documents with you, and then you'd save these documents. You wouldn't save it, of course, in the shared drive. You're going to want to save these on your own drive so you could use these for teacher evaluation purposes, and you probably save it in the name of the teacher. So I'm going to be sharing that information with you, and again, it looks like this when you will get it. And I would highly recommend you use a form such as this when you're doing your informal observations. Okay, I also want to talk about the scoring methodology. Remember, when you're scoring, I had taught you to start, for example, if we're using 3C, you start at the critical attribute level, proficient, and then based on the observed behavior, was it proficient, more or less, and you'd move right or left depending on that. And you'd keep on going through all the critical attributes until you had completed all the critical attributes, and you'd highlight each decision you make. Now, one thing, either I didn't explain it very well or maybe you forgot about it, but one of the things I wanted you to do in your informal as well as formal observations is have the teacher also highlight and score themselves. Even if you're just going in for an informal observation on one domain and component, for example 3C, the teacher would highlight where they thought they were based on the evidence that when you were in the classroom. You would highlight where you were, and every time you meet with the teacher, you sit down and have this discussion concerning what you have highlighted and what the teacher has highlighted. And in the end, of course, you're going to have to convert that discussion into words to put it into the file. But this helps you and the teacher look at and read the exact words that are in the Danielson. So I remember when I was in your district and some of the evaluators were actually talking to teachers on a formal observation, post-observation conference. In fact, if it was the final formal observation, you would go through this process for all the domain and components for domains 1, 2, 3, and 4. And while you might think it takes a lot of time, the more informal observations you've done with the teacher and scored it with the teacher, the less that this is going to cause an extended meeting in the post-observation. Now, if you've never talked to the teacher about these things, then that post-observation could take hours and hours because it'd be the first time you and the teacher have actually talked about these things. And I wanted to remind you on my 6 steps that the correct domain and component to concentrate on was 3C, engaging students in learning. So you may remember that I said if you only have time for doing 2 or 3 informal observations and 1 formal or 2 formal observations, there's a hierarchy to how you do these. It goes 3C, 3B, 3A, 3D. Then it goes 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D. And always on your formal observations, you're going to focus on 3C. You're still going to collect other evidence, obviously, but you're going to be focusing on student engagement because that is the most important domain and component to focus on. So it's just a reminder that you should be focusing most on 3C. Buy-in on the process is really talking to your teachers about how you do this work, what this work amounts to, and so there's no surprises for the teacher to doing this work, that they understand the Danielson frameworks. And that's one reason I want you to use those critical attributes when you sit down and talk to the teachers, is so that both you and the teacher then can process what the words say, and you can have the discussion about the rating system. Remember, that happens on the informal as well as the formal. Okay, changing the focus, that had to do with looking at what students are doing primarily, not what the teacher is doing. Now, most of the administrators, if not all, that I visited with when I was there recently, you all did a really good job of trying to keep yourself in the room where you would see the eyes of the students, and that's really important to do. Now, one thing I saw sometimes, but I didn't see all the time, is like when the teacher would give the students independent work to do or group work. When that happens, that's really your opportunity to get up and get next to the students and listen to what the students are saying concerning the work that they're doing. And as much as you possibly can, don't get involved as a participant in the student work that's happening at that point in time. You're there as an observational person, so you should be making observational notes about what you're seeing when you're there. Now, we talked a lot about this idea of observing more. You know, I want you to be in classrooms as much as possible. And I remember when I was sitting in on the Danielson book study at the district office, many times in that book study, teachers were bringing up words such as trust, words such as, or phrases such as, I really like it when my administrator visits my classroom. I feel a lot better when my administrator observes my classroom on multiple occasions. Okay, that's the way teachers everywhere feel. So you have to get yourself organized to a point that you can be in classrooms a lot, so that's no surprise that you're coming into the classroom. Students realize that you're going to be in a classroom on a regular basis, and you can develop some trust and rapport with the teachers about the classrooms that you're in. Now, reflection is something I think all of you need a lot of work on, or concentrated thought about. Remember, we're trying to get the teacher to reflect on their own performance. And you may remember that during the training that I was doing with you, when we talked about reflection, I had you prepare reflective questions you would ask the teacher based on the observational notes you've done. And I don't know if I really saw that during the time period I was there recently, But after you do an observation, you need to have a reflective question to ask the teacher about their practice, some reflective question that would relate to what you want the teacher to improve on. And then there's this instance of when to play the proper role of being either a coach, a mentor, or a teller. A coach is somebody who works with teachers who want to improve their performance and are open to perform. Mentoring happens with young teachers when they need a lot of direction about what they are to do. And telling is when you get to the point where when a teacher is not performing up to the standards you need, then you have to tell a teacher how to perform in order to get them to those standards. Okay, in the Danielson framework for teaching, the real difference between a distinguished level teacher and a proficient level teacher is that it's student directed versus teacher directed. You have to remember that what you're working to do is to get students owning their own learning. And by the way, that occurs in special education, kindergarten or 12th grade. It doesn't matter. The teacher should be working on the students owning their own learning. This is where real learning occurs. However, it does look differently depending on the subject grade level or ability level of the students. So you as an evaluator need to describe what it looks like for teachers who don't understand what engaged learning looks like from the learner's perspective. And that's going to differ from building to building, from grade level to grade level, and from student ability level to student ability level. Now, I was happy that many of you were asking the 3 professional learning questions that we talked about. And sometimes you'd only ask one student, sometimes you'd ask 2 or 3, but kind of what I like you to do is ask the 3 professional learning questions to at least 3 students, whether you're doing an informal or formal observation. So the first one was, what are the students learning today? For example, at the middle school, they do a great job of putting learning targets up. The kids know where the learning targets are. They can answer those questions very well, and it's a systemic process that is absolutely replicated in every classroom I was at in the middle school. Well, that needs to happen in all classrooms where the teacher has these learning targets, learning goals, whatever you want to call them, on display in the room so that the students know what they're learning today. And it's very interesting to ask the student how the teacher will know the student learned it, and then what's the teacher going to do if the student doesn't learn it. Now, this particular question has to do with the idea that as administrators or evaluators, we don't want any teacher giving up on students. So the student can't say, the teacher's not going to do anything, I'm just going to fail the class or whatever. No, that can't be the response. The response has to be that the teacher's going to do some intervention, some instruction, some tutoring, something to make sure that all the students get over the bar. So I know many administrators, and you're not alone in this, really fight this idea that I don't have time to conduct these multiple observations and reflective conversations. So there's a variety of ways to do the math, and here's just a slide where basically what I'm saying is you ought to be able to do 1 a day. And remember, some of these informal observations are only 10 or 15 minutes, and that includes reflective conversations on that work. So you ought to be able to work 1 of these in a day. Maybe you have a target of 2 a day, so that when there's days you don't do it, you at least you have some you can fall back on because you have them in the bank. But you should be able to do 2 informal or formal observations and or reflective conversations a day. It just has to become part of your practice. So if you can't get 10 in, then you get as many as you can in, again using that hierarchy of domain and components I talked about earlier, starting with 3C, 3B, 3A, 3D, and then 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D that I talked about earlier. So this is just it's a lot of words on this particular screen. You might want to refer to it later on. But basically what it's saying is, assuming you have 25 teachers, you ought to be able to get this work done. And that's at the 10 limit I'm talking about. And remember, this reflection with the teacher is very important. So you need to have the teacher reflect on their own teaching, and then remember the stems I had shared with you. How do you feel? What have you used in the class? What would it look like if 100% of the students? And what does an ideal class look like concerning whatever particular action you're wanting the teachers to be able to do? And then out of that, you got to design an action plan for the teacher. So in fact, they'll incorporate those strategies. And when you come back the next time, you can see that they have accomplished these things. What we're looking for is the teacher to grow from some of the initial observations over time, and theoretically probably from a proficient teacher into a distinguished teacher. Some evaluation tips I wanted to share with you again is, first of all, I always use a seating chart because it's really important for almost all of the components in Domain 3. And I use some kind of key to determine what I'm doing with students in the information in the classroom. And remember, this has to be converted to text if you're going to use it for evaluative purposes. Hold all your meetings in the teacher's classroom if possible. And remember to sit or stand so you can see the eyeballs of the students. And again, I want to talk about this concept again. You always want the teacher to self-evaluate and then meet and compare the teacher's self-evaluation notes with your notes to enter your discussion. It really drives the discussion that's going to happen on the post observations for both the informal and formal observations. And I think you can tell a lot by how the classroom furniture is arranged and what is in the classroom, and you need to continue paying attention to that. Again, these are my contact information. Feel free to email me, call me, and then read the information I either have on my blog site or on my wiki space concerning the work that we're doing. So I hope this video is helping you work with these things before I can get back to your district the next time. I really enjoy working with you, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.